My phone vibrated for the 10th time. At the Dallas-Fort Worth airport, my sister Brooke was screaming at a gate agent, discovering our entire family's luxury vacation flights no longer existed. I let the phone ring twice more in my quiet apartment before answering. "I canceled the tickets," I said into the sudden, dead silence of the line. Her ultimatum was to babysit her 3 kids or don't come. So, I stayed home. I am Taylor Fisher. I was 34 years old the morning I finally broke. The phone on my kitchen island vibrated. Brooke, again. That made 9 missed calls in 4 minutes. I stood in the absolute silence of my apartment, a mug of black coffee warming my hands, and listened to the low hum of my refrigerator. No screaming toddlers, no passive-aggressive sighs, just peace. On the 10th ring, I swiped green. I brought the receiver to my ear. The audio hit me like a physical blow. Dallas-Fort Worth Terminal D. I knew exactly where they were standing. I could hear the mechanized voice of the public address system announcing a boarding call for a flight to Miami. I could hear the rhythmic clatter of hard-shell suitcases rolling over tile, and piercing through it all was the sharp, panicked voice of my older sister, Brooke Halstead. "The code is invalid." "What do you mean the booking reference does not exist?" "Look at my phone. Look at it." Brooke was shrieking at some poor airline agent. "We have 3 exhausted children here. We are supposed to be flying to Florida for a luxury family retreat. Type the name in again. Fisher, Halstead. Just find the tickets." The agent's voice was faint but distinct, laced with practiced customer service neutrality. "Ma'am, I'm looking at the record right now. The entire reservation under the Fisher party was canceled last night. There are no tickets." "Canceled by who?" Brooke screamed. I took a slow sip of my coffee. I cleared my throat. "Hello, Brooke," I said. My voice cut through the background noise of the terminal. The rustling on the other end shifted. Brooke had me on speakerphone. Of course she did. She needed an audience. "Taylor," Brooke gasped, the sound of her breath catching in her throat. "Taylor, thank God you picked up. The airline system is completely glitched. They are telling us our flights to Florida are gone. You booked these. You have the confirmation emails. Get into your account right now and fix this. The kids are crying. Mom is having a panic attack." In the background, I heard my 5-year-old nephew wailing. I heard my mother, Linda, making those frantic, breathy noises she always deployed when she wanted someone else to take control of a situation. I looked out my window at the gray city skyline. I felt my pulse steady. I was incredibly, unnervingly calm. The system did not glitch. "Brooke," I said. My voice was flat, even. "I canceled the tickets." Dead silence. The kind of silence that feels heavy, like the air right before a thunderstorm. For 3 full seconds. The only sound on the line was the distant beep of an airport cart reversing. Then, the explosion. "You did what?" Brooke shrieked, her voice cracking. "Are you insane? We are standing at the check-in counter. We have 3 kids sitting on their suitcases, crying their eyes out, expecting to go to the beach, you selfish brat. How could you do this to us? How could you do this to the children?" Suddenly, a deeper, booming voice overtook the microphone. My father, Warren. He grabbed the phone. I could picture his face, flushed red, the vein in his forehead pulsing. "Taylor Fisher, this is your father," he barked. It was the voice he used when he expected unquestioning obedience. "I do not care what petty sibling argument you 2 are having. You are humiliating us in public. You pull out your credit card, you call this airline, and you book us on the next flight out of Dallas. You will do it right this second. Do you hear me?" Years ago, that tone would have sent me scrambling. I would have apologized. I would have paid whatever exorbitant last-minute fare the airline demanded. I would have swallowed my anger to keep the family peace. Not today. "No," I said. Just one word. A complete sentence. "What do you mean?" "No," my father bellowed. I did not raise my voice. I did not engage in a screaming match. I kept my tone perfectly level, letting the cold reality of my words sink in. "I mean exactly what I said," I replied. "I am not booking anything. I am not paying for anything. I am staying home. And so are all of you. You are punishing innocent children, Brooke wailed in the background. You have no heart. You are so jealous because you do not have a family of your own, so you have to ruin ours. I am not arguing with you, Brooke, I said. I am simply honoring your request. I am following your rules. What rules? She demanded, hysterical. Check the family group chat, I said. I pulled the phone away from my ear, tapped the screen, and hit send on the message I had prepared at 2:00 in the morning. It was a single screenshot. It was an email from the resort concierge, Marisol Vega. The email was a confirmation of changes made to the master reservation, changes requested by Brooke Halstead, who had named herself the co-host of the trip I was paying for. The highlighted text in the image was crystal clear. It showed that Brooke had moved me out of the private king suite I had booked for myself. She had reassigned me to the children's room. Beneath the room change, Brooke had left a specific note for the hotel staff. Taylor can sleep on floor pallets in the kids' loft. I waited, listening to the silence on the line stretch out as I knew Brooke was pulling up the image on her screen. I heard a sharp intake of breath, the sound of a woman who just realized her trap had snapped shut on her own ankle. You told me my role on this vacation, I said, my voice cutting through the thick silence. You texted me your ultimatum yesterday. Babysit kids or do not come. Taylor, wait, that was just a misunderstanding about the sleeping arrangements. We were just trying to save space, Brooke stammered, the aggressive fire suddenly gone, replaced by a desperate backpedaling. It was not a misunderstanding, I said. You demoted me to a full-time, unpaid nanny on a luxury vacation that I fully funded. You wanted me to sleep on the floor. So, I took your advice. I decided not to come. Taylor, please. The kids, my mother pleaded in the background. I did not waver. I typed one final sentence into the group chat, hitting send right as I spoke the words aloud to the stunned, silent audience standing at Terminal D. You told me not to come, I said softly. Enjoy the floor. I tapped the red button. The call ended. The silence of my kitchen rushed back in. I tossed the phone onto the island. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from the adrenaline of finally fighting back. The word floor carried a double meaning I hoped Brooke appreciated, the floor pallets she wanted to dump me on, and the hard, cold tile of the Dallas-Fort Worth airport, where she was currently stranded with a mountain of luggage. I took another sip of coffee. It tasted incredible. I thought the drama was over. I thought I had just executed a clean, perfect strike of boundaries. I thought canceling the flights was the final period at the end of a very long, toxic sentence. I was wrong. The airport meltdown was just the overture. I had no idea that pulling the plug on this vacation had just detonated a ticking time bomb. I was about to discover that the disrespect was just the surface layer. Hidden beneath the fake smiles and the demand for free babysitting was a massive, desperate financial conspiracy, and they were planning to use me to pay for it all. 48 hours before my phone became a weapon. I was sitting in a windowless, over-air-conditioned conference room at Crestline Meridian Health Systems. I am the Director of Supply Chain Procurement for a network of 12 hospitals. For the past 9 months, my life had been a relentless, grinding cycle of crisis management. We were dealing with a massive backlog of critical medical equipment. My days were spent fighting with overseas vendors, tracking cargo ships, and listening to hospital administrators scream about shortages. That Tuesday, the final day before my supposed vacation, I had spent 7 straight hours in a brutal negotiation over ventilators and surgical monitors. The fluorescent lights buzzed above me like a swarm of angry bees. The stale coffee in my paper cup had turned bitter and cold hours ago. When I finally closed my laptop and walked out to my car, my body felt like it was made of heavy lead. I drove home through dense city traffic, the red taillights blurring together into a long ribbon of stress. When I unlocked the door to my apartment, I dropped my heavy leather tote bag on the floor with a dull thud. My home was objectively beautiful. I had worked hard for it. It had dark hardwood floors, a minimalist kitchen with marble countertops, and floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over the glittering city skyline. But standing there in the entryway, the place felt completely hollow. It was freezing cold. It was dead quiet. It felt less like a sanctuary and more like an expensive box I used for sleeping between shifts. I pressed the heels of my hands into my eyes, trying to massage away a pounding migraine that had settled deeply behind my forehead. The muscles in my neck and shoulders were pulled so tight they felt like steel cables ready to snap. I was surviving on maybe 4 hours of restless sleep a night. I was not just tired, I was completely, dangerously depleted. That profound exhaustion was the entire reason I had planned the trip to Florida. It was a desperate bid for a lifeline. I needed to step off the corporate treadmill before my body completely gave out on me. It was also my parents' 40th wedding anniversary. I saw an opportunity to do something good, something healing. For years, the distance between me and my family had been slowly but steadily growing. I was the career-obsessed single woman in the city. They were the tight-knit suburban unit. I thought a lavish, stress-free vacation could bridge that gap. I thought I could buy us a happy memory. So, I opened my bank accounts and handled every single detail. I paid for round-trip flights for all 7 of us. I secured a massive, gorgeous villa at the Seabriar Dunes Resort, nestled right on the Florida Panhandle. I arranged a private luxury van to pick them up from the airport. I even put down a heavy deposit for a private, catered anniversary dinner on the beach, complete with a local photographer to capture the sunset. I chose Seabriar Dunes very deliberately. I scoured the internet to find a place that offered maximum distraction for my sister Brooke's 3 young children. The resort featured a massive lazy river, multiple shallow pools, a private stretch of pristine beach, and a fully staffed, supervised kids club. My logic was entirely based on self-preservation. If the children were endlessly entertained by resort staff and water slides, the adults could actually rest. I was not doing this to be worshipped. I did not want my mother to weep with gratitude, or my father to give a grand speech about my generosity. My price for funding this entire production was incredibly low. I just wanted 1 single week of uninterrupted peace. I wanted to sleep until 9 in the morning without the violent buzzing of an alarm clock. I wanted to lie on a padded lounge chair and read a trashy paperback thriller from cover to cover. I wanted to use the spa appointment I had booked for a 90-minute deep tissue massage to physically force the tension out of my spine. Most of all, I wanted to sit at a dinner table, drink a glass of wine, and just be a daughter. I wanted to be a sister. I wanted to exist in their presence without having to serve a function. I wanted a week off from being the family mechanic, because historically, that was my only real role. I was the fixer. I was the walking emergency fund. Whenever the family engine sputtered, I was expected to pour cash into it until it ran smoothly again. When Mom had sudden, expensive copays for her physical therapy, I quietly paid the clinic directly so Dad would not start a screaming match about their retirement budget. 2 winters ago, when Dad's truck blew a transmission, I covered the mechanic's bill. He barely said thank you, acting as if my disposable income was a natural resource he had the inherent right to mine. When my younger brother, Rowan, hit a financial wall during his sophomore year of college, it was my checkbook that covered his tuition gap, so he would not have to drop out and move back into his childhood bedroom. I had spent my entire adult life using my income to buy peace. I absorbed their stress, their poor planning, their financial shortfalls, and I paid it away. I learned from a very young age that being agreeable, useful, and generous was the easiest way to survive the Fisher family dynamic. I swallowed their passive-aggressive comments about my single status. I ignored the way Brooke treated my career as a personal insult to her choices. I just kept my head down, worked hard, and wrote the checks. But I truly believed this Florida trip was different. This was not a rescue mission. Nobody was facing eviction. Nobody was sitting in a hospital waiting room. This was a gift, a shared celebration of a major milestone. I genuinely thought that if I provided the perfect, frictionless setting, completely free of any financial burden for them, we could just relax and be a normal family for 7 days. I was so incredibly foolish. I projected my own desperate need for rest onto people who only saw me as an endless resource to be managed. What my family did not realize, what Brooke fatally miscalculated when she began plotting behind my back, was the sheer depth of my burnout. For 34 years, my default setting had been absolute compliance. I possessed a deep reservoir of tolerance reserved exclusively for my family's bad behavior, but the hospital supply chain crisis had drained that reservoir until the bottom was cracked and completely dry. The late nights, the high-stakes arguments, the constant pressure of keeping medical facilities afloat had entirely stripped away my protective layer of politeness. I had absolutely zero energy left to pretend. I had no capacity to smile tightly and play the role of the easygoing, obedient workhorse who took the scraps they threw at her. The intense physical toll of my job had forged a hard, sharp boundary inside me. I was tired. I was bone-tired. And when you are that tired, the polite illusions you maintain to keep other people comfortable just burn away, leaving nothing but cold, hard reality. The notification chime on my phone shattered the quiet of my living room. It was the Fisher family group chat. My sister Brooke had uploaded a document titled Florida Coverage Schedule. I opened the attachment, expecting a list of dinner reservations or maybe excursion times for the boat tours I had mentioned. Instead, I found a color-coded spreadsheet. My name was highlighted in a violent, neon yellow, blocking out massive chunks of time. Brooke had assigned me to watch her 3 children from 8 o'clock in the morning until 4 o'clock in the afternoon, every single day of the trip. Below the daily grid, she had added a cheerful little note, complete with a smiley face emoji, assigning me 2 additional evenings of childcare so she and her husband, Connor Halstead, could attend a private romantic dinner and an adults-only beach party. I stared at the glowing screen. A cold, heavy knot formed in my stomach. The sheer audacity of the document took my breath away. I took a deep breath, composed myself, and typed a measured, polite response. Brooke, I am really looking forward to spending time with the kids. I will absolutely take them down to the ocean for a few hours in the afternoons, and we can all do family dinners together. But I cannot be the full-time nanny on this trip. I am taking this week to rest. The typing bubbles appeared immediately. Brooke did not miss a beat. She bypassed logic entirely and went straight for the emotional jugular. Wow, just wow, she wrote. You do not have children. Taylor, you have absolutely no idea how exhausting our lives are. Connor and I desperately need a break. It is genuinely sad that you care more about sitting around doing nothing than bonding with your own niece and nephews. She masterfully twisted a simple boundary regarding my time into a sweeping declaration that I despised her children. My phone buzzed again before I could even draft a reply. This time, it was my mother, Linda. She bypassed sending a private message and addressed the entire group, perfectly weaponizing maternal guilt for an audience. Taylor, family means sacrifice, she typed. Brooke needs this rest much more than you do. You spend your entire life prioritizing your corporate job over us. You are always so absent. This is your chance to finally step up, be present, and make it up to your family. Then came my father, Warren. He always waited until the women had softened the target before dropping his heavy gavel. You think throwing your paycheck around makes you a good daughter, he texted. You have money, Taylor, but you severely lack family affection. Writing a check does not mean anything if you refuse to actually serve your family when we need you to step up. The word serve made my blood run cold. It echoed in my empty apartment. I pressed my mother's contact name and called her directly. I needed to hear her voice. I needed to know if she truly supported this blatant exploitation. She answered on the first ring, her tone already defensive. Mom, this is insane, I said, skipping the polite greeting. I paid for this entire week so we could all relax. I am not spending 40 hours acting as an unpaid babysitter on a vacation I financed. My mother let out a long, exaggerated sigh, the kind she used to show extreme disappointment. You are being incredibly selfish. Taylor, Brooke is a mother. You are just single. Your time is simply not as valuable as hers. She is raising the next generation. What are you doing? Reading spreadsheets. I am exhausted. Mom, I said, my voice tight, trying to keep the hurt from bleeding through. Well, if you are going to bring that toxic attitude, she replied coldly, her voice hardening into ice. If you refuse to help your sister and act like a part of this family, then it is best you do not come at all. We do not need your negativity ruining our anniversary. She hung up. The line went dead. I sat on my sofa, the dead phone heavy in my hand. They really saw my presence as entirely conditional. I was only welcome if I was useful. If I was not serving them, I was ruining their trip. 10 minutes later, a new email popped into my inbox. It was not from my family. It was from Marisol Vega, the concierge at the resort in Florida. The subject line read, "Reclarification on room assignments and spa services." Marisol had intended to reply to Brooke, but she accidentally hit reply all. Catching my email address in the CC line, I opened the thread and scrolled down to the previous messages. It was a lengthy exchange between Brooke and the resort staff, dating back 3 full weeks. 3 weeks, long before our flight was supposed to take off, long before she dropped the schedule in the group chat. Brooke had introduced herself to Marisol as the co-host of the vacation in the very first email. She instructed the hotel to move me out of the master suite I had booked for myself. She directed them to reclassify my reservation into the loft adjacent to the kids' room. My eyes scanned the next paragraph, and my breath hitched in my throat. Brooke had sent a bulleted list of demands to the hotel staff. She requested that the hotel provide baby gates for the loft stairs. She explicitly asked them to set up floor pallets for an adult to sleep on in the children's room. She was literally building a nursery and putting me on the floor of it. But the final bullet point was the one that completely shattered any lingering illusions I had about my family. Brooke had written, "Please transfer Taylor Fisher's welcome spa appointment to my name. Taylor will be busy with the children and will not have time to attend." I read the words again and again. The color-coded schedule in the group chat was not a last-minute request born out of a tired mother's desperation. This was a highly calculated, deeply premeditated theft. Brooke had spent nearly a month quietly dismantling my vacation behind my back, stripping my room, stealing my appointments, and cementing my role as the hired help. My parents were fully in on it, enforcing the hierarchy the second I pushed back. They had never, not for one single second, viewed me as a guest on my own trip. To them, I was just a walking wallet attached to a disposable babysitter. And the worst part was, they assumed I would just take it. After the line went dead, I did not cry. There were no tears, no dramatic breakdown on the living room rug, no urge to throw my phone against the wall. Instead, I felt an icy clarity wash over me. It was the exact same detached, clinical focus that took over my brain during a major supply chain failure at the hospital network. I walked into my home office, sat down at my heavy walnut desk, and opened my laptop. I took one deep breath, let it out slowly, and went to work. This was no longer a family vacation. It was a breached contract, and I was initiating a full vendor shutdown. I opened a new browser window and began pulling up every single reservation confirmation. I tackled the logistics with surgical precision, reading through the terms and conditions of every booking. First, the flights, because I had purchased premium refundable fares for my parents. Their tickets would be returned directly to my credit card in full. For my sister's family of 5, I had opted for the comprehensive travel protection plan. Canceling their legs of the journey meant the value would be converted into airline credits rather than cash. I did not care. They could use those credits to fly to a parking lot for all I cared. Next, the resort accommodations. I checked the cancellation policy for the Seabriar Dunes villa. We were exactly 12 hours out from the strict check-in window. According to the fine print, canceling right now would incur a penalty equal to a single night's stay. But the remaining 80% of the massive deposit would be refunded to my account within 5 to 7 business days. It was a financial hit I was more than willing to absorb to buy my freedom. But before I clicked a single red button, I stopped. My hands hovered over the keyboard. I knew these people. I knew the narrative they would inevitably spin to the extended family and their social circles. I knew I would be painted as the unstable, cruel spinster who ruined a beautiful family milestone out of sheer malice. I needed armor. I opened a fresh digital folder on my desktop and named it Florida. I took high-resolution screenshots of the group chat. Ensuring the timestamps were clearly visible, I saved the color-coded babysitting spreadsheet. I exported the accidental email thread from the resort concierge, explicitly highlighting the request for floor palettes and the reassignment of my spa appointment. I saved everything in duplicate. The evidence was secured. A perfect digital paper trail to combat future gaslighting. Then, the purge began. I clicked cancel on my parents' flights. The screen refreshed. Status changed to void. I clicked cancel on my sister's family flights. Status changed to void. I logged into the luxury resort portal and authorized the cancellation of the multi-room villa. I sent a brief, formal email to the private transportation company, nullifying the luxury van airport pickup. Finally, I logged onto the restaurant's website and released the oceanfront table for the anniversary dinner. Every single booking was legally in my name. Every single credit card used was mine. The digital footprint was entirely clean, perfectly legal, and completely undeniable. As the automated cancellation emails began flooding my inbox, chiming one after another, a complex wave of emotion hit me. The primary sensation was a profound, light physical relief. The crushing weight of a 40-hour babysitting shift evaporated from my shoulders, but right behind the relief was a sharp, hollow ache in my chest. With every confirmation email that landed in my inbox, I was not just dismantling a trip to the beach, I was systematically dismantling the fantasy I had clung to for over a decade. I was canceling the illusion that if I just gave enough money, spent enough time, and accommodated enough of their demands, they would eventually respect me as an equal member of the family. The inbox counter ticked up to 8 unread messages. The fantasy was officially dead. A normal person might have called them immediately to announce the cancellation. I did not. They had handed me a very clear, uncompromising ultimatum: accept the conditions of servitude or do not show up. I chose the latter. I decided to let them experience the full, unfiltered reality of their own demands. I wanted them to pack their bags, load the cars, drive through morning traffic, and walk into that airport terminal completely blind. Before I went to sleep, I drafted a single text message. I kept it brutally short. I did not use profanity. I did not hurl insults. I simply typed out a reflection of their own exact words, attached the screenshot of the concierge email regarding the floor arrangements, and left it sitting in the text field. I did not press send. I would save it for the exact right moment. The next morning, I woke up naturally at 7 o'clock. There was no frantic packing. There was no rushing to meet an airport shuttle. The apartment was bathed in soft, quiet morning light. I walked into the kitchen and began the slow, deliberate process of making pour-over coffee. I measured the beans. I boiled the water. The rich, earthy aroma filled the space. I poured the steaming dark liquid into my favorite ceramic mug, walked over to the kitchen island, and sat down on a bar stool. I looked at the clock on the wall. They would be arriving at the airline check-in counters right about now. I took a sip of my coffee. It was perfectly hot. The silence of the apartment was magnificent. The phone lit up nonstop for the next 15 minutes. Brooke, Mom, Dad, then Brooke again. I let it ring. When Connor finally called, I answered. The airport chaos poured through the speaker, children crying, my father barking at staff, Brooke spiraling. I kept my voice flat and repeated the same thing I had followed their ultimatum, and I was not booking anything else. I watched the screen flash. I took another slow sip of my coffee. For the absolute first time in my entire life, I just sat there and let it ring. I let the phone dance across the cool marble of my kitchen island for exactly 15 minutes. I watched the caller ID cycle through the entire Fisher family roster. Brooke, Mom, Dad, Brooke again. I wanted them to sit in the chaos of their own making for just a little while longer. I wanted the reality of the situation to fully sink into their bones before I engaged. When the screen flashed with my brother-in-law Connor's name, I finally swiped the green icon and brought the phone to my ear. The audio that assaulted me was pure, unadulterated pandemonium. It sounded like the entire Dallas-Fort Worth airport was actively collapsing around them. I could hear Connor shouting at a ticketing agent, his voice cracking with an unnatural level of panic. I heard my father, Warren, barking at a security guard, demanding they summon the terminal manager immediately, and cutting through all of it was the sound of Brooke's 3 children wailing in exhausted unison. "Taylor!" Brooke shrieked, clearly snatching the phone from her husband's hand. "You vindictive, spiteful saboteur! Do you have any idea what you have done? We are stranded." "I know exactly what I have done," I replied, keeping my voice dangerously low and steady. "I followed your instructions." "You are a monster," she screamed, abandoning any pretense of logic. "You did this because you are bitter. You are a miserable, lonely woman who is insanely jealous because you do not have a real family of your own. So you have to destroy mine." Her insults washed over me without leaving a mark. Years ago, that kind of attack would have crushed me. Today it just sounded pathetic. "I am not reacting to your tantrums today, Brooke," I said. "You sent me a schedule assigning me 40 hours of unpaid labor on a trip I completely financed. You emailed the resort and told them to put me on the floor. I sent the proof to the group chat. I am simply holding you to your own ultimatum. You said if I do not babysit, I should not come. So, I am not coming, and neither are you." There was a scuffle on the other end. My mother's voice suddenly filled the speaker, thick with theatrical tears. "Taylor, please," Linda sobbed, weaponizing her distress. "Listen to the babies crying. They are completely innocent in all of this. They packed their little swimsuits. How can you be so cold? How can you hurt your own nieces and nephews?" I closed my eyes and pinched the bridge of my nose. "Mom, stop it. Do not use the kids as a shield. I love them very much, but I'm not going to be manipulated into becoming free household labor just because you and Brooke decided my time is worthless. I refuse to be tricked. Nobody is tricking you." My father's voice boomed, drowning out my mother's fake crying. He had commandeered the phone. "Taylor Fisher, you listen to me right now. You have an obligation to this family. You are going to pull out your credit card, call the airline desk, and fix this mess. You will book us on the very next flight. That is an order." I stood up from the bar stool and walked over to the floor-to-ceiling window. Looking out at the calm, quiet city below, I felt a surge of absolute, undeniable power. "No," I said. The single syllable hung in the air, heavy and absolute. "What did you just say to me?" my father demanded, his voice dropping to a dangerous growl. "I said no, Dad," I replied, my voice perfectly clear. "I am not booking new tickets. I am not opening my wallet. I am done." I did not offer a lengthy explanation. I did not justify my decision. I just let the boundary stand on its own. That was when the facade began to crack. Connor suddenly grabbed the phone back. He sounded utterly desperate, breathing heavily into the microphone. "Taylor, you do not understand the position you are putting us in," Connor pleaded, his voice stripped of his usual arrogant swagger. "We already took the time off work. We prepared everything for this week. We have so much riding on being in Florida right now. You cannot pull the rug out from under us like this." His words struck me as incredibly odd. It was a family vacation. What exactly did he have riding on it before I could ask? Brooke's voice echoed in the background, shrill and frantic. "Tell her we already promised them," Brooke blurted out. "We cannot back out now. Connor, we promised them." The line went dead silent for a fraction of a second, followed by a muffled sound, as if Connor had hastily clamped his hand over the phone's microphone to silence his wife. "Promised who, Brooke?" I asked, my tone suddenly sharp. Zeroing in on the slip-up, Connor scrambled to recover. "Nobody. She means the kids. Taylor, we promised the kids we would take them to the ocean. Please, just put the flights back on your card." It was a lie. A very bad, very transparent lie. You do not talk about your children with that specific tone of panicked dread, the desperation in Connor's voice, the sheer terror of not getting to Florida, was vastly disproportionate to missing a few days at the beach. They were hiding something. The vacation was not just a vacation, it was a stage for something else. "Good luck getting home from the airport," I said, and pressed the red button to end the call. I did not block their numbers. I wanted the lines of communication open. I walked back to the kitchen counter and poured my coffee down the sink. I suddenly felt very awake. Exactly 30 minutes later, a soft chime came from my laptop in the home office. I walked over and tapped the spacebar to wake the screen. It was a new email. Exactly 30 minutes later, a billing email from Suncoast Luxury Charters in Destin. Florida landed in my inbox by mistake, likely because my contact information was still tied to the resort's master excursion file. The subject line read, "Final Pass Due Invoice Notice." It was for a private half-day yacht rental totaling $3,500 with Connor Halstead listed as the primary contact. I scrolled down and saw 3 failed payment attempts in the last 48 hours. I leaned back in my chair. A private yacht had never been part of the trip I planned. This was no longer about a tired mother needing help. They were building an image and expecting me to fund it. I stared at the glowing screen of my laptop, the past due invoice from Suncoast Luxury Charters illuminating the dark wood of my desk. The bill was for a half-day yacht rental, totaling $3,500. I scrolled down to the payment history section. It showed 3 separate, desperate attempts to process the transaction over the last 48 hours. Every single attempt had been declined by the credit card issuer. I leaned back in my chair. My meticulously planned itinerary for this trip included lounging by the resort pool, building sandcastles, and maybe booking a casual sunset dolphin cruise. A private luxury yacht was completely out of scope. If Connor was frantically trying to rent boats he could not pay for, I needed to know what else they had manipulated. I opened a new tab and logged directly into the Seabriar Dunes reservation portal, bypassing the main itinerary dashboard to dig straight into the itemized guest folios. My jaw tightened. Brooke had been incredibly busy. Using the master confirmation number, she had hijacked the booking management link. She had not just changed my room, she had added a daily luxury cabana rental by the adult pool, booked a private sunset photo session with an expensive local photographer, and upgraded all of our standard family dinners to premium seafood tasting menus. I picked up my phone and dialed the resort front desk. I needed to know exactly how she had bypassed their security protocols to alter a reservation secured entirely by my credit card. I was transferred to a guest services manager who pulled up the call logs. The manager, sounding extremely apologetic, explained that Brooke had phoned them no less than 6 times over the past month. She had weaponized her familial connection, repeatedly introducing herself as the sister of the woman paying, claiming she was organizing surprise luxury upgrades for our parents' anniversary. She had used my generosity as a blank check to inflate the final bill by thousands of dollars, fully expecting I would just blindly pay the balance at checkout to avoid a public scene. The narrative of the exhausted mother desperately needing a break was crumbling rapidly. You do not need a $3,000 yacht and a private photographer to catch up on sleep. You need those things to create an image. They were treating my vacation like a highly produced film set. My corporate procurement background kicked into high gear. When a vendor's behavior becomes erratic and they start hiding costs, you audit their financials. I opened a new browser window and navigated to the public records database for the county where Brooke and Connor lived. I paid the $20 access fee with my debit card and typed their names into the search bar. The results populated instantly, painting a picture of total financial freefall. First, I found a notice of default filed by their homeowners association for 9 months of unpaid neighborhood dues. Second, a mechanic's lien had been placed against their property by a local roofing contractor for unpaid repairs. But the real bombshell was buried in the civil court docket. I searched for Connor's marketing agency, Halstead Brand Labs. He was currently being sued by 2 separate clients for severe breach of contract. Furthermore, A judge had already issued a summary judgment against his business account for over $40,000 in unpaid vendor fees. I sat frozen in my home office. They were absolutely drowning in debt. But how were they still surviving? How had they not lost the house yet? I dug deeper, shifting my search to property deeds and mortgage records. Crossing my fingers that my next suspicion was wrong, I entered my parents' names and their suburban address. The search engine spun for a second, before revealing a secondary mortgage document filed just 3 months ago. It was a home equity line of credit, drawn against the house they had lived in for 30 years, for the exact amount of $100,000. I cross-referenced the filing date of that loan. It aligned perfectly with a boastful, arrogant post Connor had made on his professional networking page about a massive cash injection and business expansion for his agency. The sickening reality snapped into perfect, undeniable focus. My parents had secretly leveraged their retirement home to bail out Connor's failing business. They had drained their own financial safety net to save the golden child and her husband. The family cash reserves were completely empty. That was exactly why they were so fiercely determined to force me into the nanny role and make me cover every single expense of this vacation. They had given everything they had to Brooke and Connor, and they expected me to silently absorb the collateral damage and foot the bill for the family's lifestyle. But why the yacht? Why the sudden, desperate need for luxury photo shoots on my dime? I opened a private browsing window and went straight to Brooke's lifestyle blog. It was a perfectly curated, aggressively aesthetic website that she used to bring in a modest income from affiliate links. I searched her recent indexed pages. Looking for anything related to Florida, I found a hidden link, a draft post that had been accidentally left public on her server. The title of the draft made my stomach turn over. Our sponsored family reset week at Seabriar Dunes. I read through the text. The post was a detailed outline for a massive brand pitch. It included placeholders for the yacht photos, the private dinners, and the luxury cabanas. It talked about how her husband's successful agency allowed them to take these extravagant getaways. They were not just stealing my vacation. They were planning to pass off my hard-earned money as their own lavish lifestyle to secure brand sponsorships and dig Connor's agency out of its grave. And my designated role in all of this was not just to pay for the stage. I was supposed to be the free, invisible childcare, keeping the kids out of the frame while they filmed their fake, luxurious life on my dime. My phone screen lit up with an Instagram notification. Brooke had gone public. I opened the application and watched a newly uploaded reel. She had filmed herself sitting on a terminal bench, her makeup artfully smudged, looking the picture of a traumatized martyr. The camera panned slowly to her 3 children, who were looking genuinely miserable amidst a sea of haphazardly stacked luggage. The caption scrolling across the bottom of the screen was a masterclass in digital manipulation. It read, "When the aunt you thought loved your children abandons them at the gate, heartbroken. Some people just hate kids." My finger hovered over the comment button. A fierce, burning desire to scream the absolute truth into the void threatened to overtake me. Then, a text message from Connor popped up at the top of my screen. "You are destroying the family reputation. Taylor, fix this now, or you will regret it." That was the exact moment the atmosphere in my apartment shifted. This was no longer a petty sibling rivalry or a disagreement over vacation etiquette. This was a coordinated, aggressive smear campaign designed to force my hand. I immediately closed the social media application and called my closest friend, Naomi Reed. Naomi was not just a friend. She was a ruthless, brilliant corporate litigator who thrived on dismantling bullies. "Do not post a single word," Naomi ordered the second I finished explaining the airport meltdown and the sudden social media attack. "Do not comment. Do not try to defend yourself online. We are treating this as a potential defamation case and financial fraud. You need to stop arguing and start archiving. Export everything right now." I spent the next 2 hours turning my pristine home office into a digital forensics laboratory. I exported the entire history of the family group chat, meticulously ensuring that every single timestamp and read receipt was clearly visible. I dug into the raw data and captured the metadata from the resort concierge emails, creating a concrete record that proved exactly when and from which IP address Brooke had maliciously altered my reservations. Most importantly, I downloaded every single bank statement, credit card receipt, and invoice. I needed irrefutable, ironclad proof that I was the sole financier of the entire trip from the very beginning. I knew their next logical move would be to claim I had promised a no-strings-attached financial gift to the family. And I needed the overwhelming paper trail to crush that lie before it could even take root. Just as I was encrypting the files into a secure folder on my desktop, my phone vibrated with a direct message. It was from my younger brother, Rowan. Up until this exact point, Rowan had been completely silent. He usually sided with my parents by default, keeping his head down and his mouth shut to avoid drawing my father's legendary temper. The message contained no greeting and no text, only a single photograph. It looked like a picture taken hastily of another phone screen. A second message from Rowan followed immediately after. I am so sorry. Taylor, I saw this open on Connor's phone while he was at the ticketing counter screaming at the agent. I took a picture when he set the phone down to grab his wallet. I thought you should know what they were really planning. I clicked on the image and zoomed in. It was a screenshot of the notes application on Connor's device. The document was boldly titled, "Keep Taylor Calm." My blood ran ice cold as I read through the bulleted list. It was a step-by-step playbook for a financial ambush. Step 1. Let Taylor handle the kids for the first 2 days, so she feels involved and appreciated. Step 2. Keep the champagne flowing at the anniversary dinner. Make a toast to her generosity. Step 3. Pitch the bridge payment. Beside Step 3 was a specific, staggering number $35,000. They were planning to corner me at a romantic beachfront dinner, surround me with my smiling family, and aggressively pressure me into handing over $35,000 as a bridge loan to cover the lawsuit against Connor's failing marketing agency. But it was the final line at the very bottom of the digital note that made my stomach completely drop out. It read, "Mom can guilt her. Dad can push family duty. Do not mention the home equity line of credit yet." I stared at the glowing screen, struggling to process the sheer, terrifying level of calculation. My own parents were not just blindly complicit. They were active, assigned players in a premeditated scheme to extract a massive sum of money from me. They had a script. Rowan sent one final, heartbreaking message. "They were talking about you like you were an ATM. Taylor, not a sister, not a daughter, just a funding source. I am completely out. I cannot be a part of this. Use this picture however you need to." I forwarded the image directly to Naomi without typing a single word. She called me back less than 3 minutes later. Her voice was pure, unyielding steel. "They are trying to lay the groundwork to sue you for backing out of a verbal contract," Naomi said, her tone entirely professional, "by painting you as unstable and vindictive online. They are hoping to publicly pressure you into paying them just to go away and save your reputation. I am drafting a formal cease and desist letter right this second. It will demand Brooke remove all defamatory content immediately and explicitly forbid them from using your name or likeness for any of their fake brand sponsorships. Send it," I said, feeling a new, hardened resolve settling over my entire body. I was done being the victim of their narrative, but I had underestimated Brooke's complete detachment from reality. Less than 1 hour after Naomi emailed the stern legal warning to both Brooke and Connor, my sister decided to double down on her attack. A new notification pinged loudly from my phone. Brooke had updated her public story. It was a heartbreaking picture of my 5-year-old nephew, curled up asleep on a thin, scratchy airport blanket spread across the dirty terminal tile. The caption beneath the photo was a direct, twisted mockery of my final text message. It read, "When your own sister forces her nephews to sleep on the ground and tells them to enjoy the floor, we are trying to stay strong." She was taking my boundary, the very boundary she had forced me to set, and fashioning it into a weapon to destroy me in the court of public opinion. The intercom on my wall buzzed sharply at 8 o'clock the following evening. I had spent the entire day ignoring the frantic digital barrage from my family, letting my lawyer handle the formal cease and desist warnings. I pressed the talk button. It was Marcus, the evening concierge for my building. His usually calm, professional voice was strained. He informed me that 4 adults were currently standing in the lobby, arguing loudly with each other and demanding to be led up to my floor. He added that a few residents had already complained about the noise and asked if he should call the police. I told him I would be right down. I did not change out of my comfortable linen house clothes. I picked up my phone, opened the voice memo application, and hit the red record button. I walked to the elevator, holding the device openly in my hand. When the polished metal doors slid open at the ground floor, the visual contrast hit me like a physical wave. The lobby of my building was a quiet, expansive space filled with soft ambient lighting, gray marble pillars, and quiet jazz playing from hidden speakers. Standing directly in the center of it, looking completely out of place and entirely unhinged, was my family, Brooke, Connor, and my parents. The children were nowhere to be seen, likely dumped with Connor's mother. Brooke saw me first. The vicious, calculating woman who had spent the last 48 hours painting me as a child-abusing monster on the internet vanished instantly. Her shoulders slumped, her face was pale and drawn. She rushed toward me, her hands clasped together in a frantic, theatrical gesture of begging. "Taylor, thank God," Brooke cried out, her voice echoing awkwardly off the high ceiling. "Please, you have to let us upstairs. We are truly out of options. We need to stay with you for a few weeks, just until we figure this out, and Connor needs an advance to retain his defense lawyer. You have to help us." I stopped walking. I stayed deliberately near the front desk. Standing directly beneath the black dome of the primary security camera, Marcus stood at attention behind the mahogany counter, his eyes darting between us. "Nobody is going upstairs," I said. My voice was calm, pitched at a normal conversational volume, which only made their frantic energy seem more ridiculous. "We can talk right here, where there are witnesses and cameras." My father, Warren, puffed up his chest, his face turning a familiar shade of angry red. "You will not treat your family like common criminals in a public lobby. Taylor, take us to your apartment right now." I did not even look at him. I kept my eyes locked on Brooke and Connor. I decided to drop the hammer immediately, bypassing their entire script of victimhood. "Where did Mom and Dad's home equity line of credit go?" I asked. The question sucked the air completely out of the lobby. My father physically recoiled, his mouth falling open in genuine, stunned disbelief. He stared at me, the commanding patriarch suddenly reduced to a deer caught in the headlights. He truly believed I was completely blind to their financial ruin. My mother, Linda, broke first. She covered her face with her hands and began to sob, a harsh, ugly sound that drew the attention of an older couple waiting for the valet. "We had to help them, Taylor." My mother wept, stepping forward to grab my arm, though I smoothly stepped out of her reach. Connor's business was failing. They were going to lose the house. He promised us he would pay it all back within 6 months. He said he had a massive deal lining up in Florida. I turned my gaze to Connor. The arrogant marketing executive looked cornered and desperate. "A deal in Florida," I pressed, letting the silence hang until he was forced to fill it. "It was a brand sponsorship," Connor muttered, his eyes darting nervously toward the security guard. "A high-end travel luggage company. They wanted lifestyle content, luxury family travel. We needed the perfect backdrop to shoot the pitch and secure the contract. That contract would have saved the agency and paid off your parents." The sheer, staggering audacity of the confession left me breathless for a fraction of a second. "So, you used the money you drained from my parents' retirement home to pay for a private yacht and luxury cabanas," I stated, putting the pieces together out loud. "You were going to use the trip I paid for as your free movie set, and you needed me there to wrangle your 3 children so they would not ruin your aesthetic shots. And you ruined it," Brooke suddenly shrieked, the begging persona evaporating, replaced once again by venom. You canceled the trip and breached the contract with the photographer and the charter company. The deal fell through because of you. You owe us that money." "No," I replied, my voice turning to ice. "I do not owe you a single dime. You gambled with someone else's money and you planned to use my physical labor to pull off a fraud. You lost your own bet." Connor's face contorted with rage. He took a sudden, aggressive step toward me. His eyes locked onto the screen of my phone, realizing the red timer was ticking upward. "Are you recording this?" he demanded, reaching his hand out to snatch the device from my grip. "Delete that right now." He never made contact. Marcus, the concierge, moved with terrifying speed. He stepped smoothly between us, his hand raised in a strict, authoritative halt. "Sir, you need to step back immediately," Marcus warned, his voice low and incredibly firm. "If you move toward this resident again, I will have the police here in under 3 minutes. I strongly suggest you all leave the premises." Before Connor could argue, the heavy glass revolving doors of the lobby spun. My younger brother, Rowan, walked into the building. He looked exhausted, his hands shoved deep into the pockets of his jacket. He walked straight past our parents and stood directly beside me. "They are not leaving until you hear the rest of it, Dad," Rowan said, his voice shaking slightly but holding firm. My father looked at his only son, confusion and betrayal warring on his face. "Rowan, what are you doing? Get over here." "No," Rowan replied. "I am not hiding it for you anymore. I saw the notes on Connor's phone. Dad, I know about the $35,000 bridge loan you were all planning to corner Taylor into signing at the anniversary dinner. You were going to use Mom's tears to trap her into paying off Connor's lawsuit." My parents froze. The absolute silence that followed was not born of shock, but of sheer, undeniable guilt. They had been caught. The entire ugly parasitic machinery of our family dynamic was laid completely bare under the bright halogen lights of the lobby. I looked at my mother, whose fake tears had suddenly dried up. I looked at my father, who could not even meet my eyes, for my entire life. I had viewed these two people as authorities I desperately needed to please, as parents whose love I could eventually earn if I just proved my worth. But standing there, listening to the quiet hum of the building's air conditioning, that lifelong illusion shattered completely. I did not see my parents anymore. I saw two deeply flawed adults who had actively chosen to throw their own daughter under a financial bus to protect the golden child and maintain a pathetic illusion of suburban success. The heavy, suffocating weight of hoping they would change finally lifted off my chest, leaving behind a cold, clean emptiness. Exactly 3 days after the disastrous confrontation in my building lobby, a stranger in a beige windbreaker knocked on my apartment door and handed me a thick manila envelope. "You have been served," he said, turning on his heel and walking down the hallway. I opened the heavy envelope and pulled out a stack of legal documents. Brooke and Connor had actually done it. They had filed a civil lawsuit against me. The primary complaints were breach of verbal contract for a promised gift and tortious interference with business expectancy. They were officially claiming that my decision to cancel the vacation had caused catastrophic financial harm to Connor's marketing agency by destroying his chance to secure a luxury luggage sponsorship. They were seeking over $50,000 in damages. The premise was completely absurd. I knew it. And my lawyer, Naomi, knew it. But the American legal system does not automatically filter out absurdity. It simply processes it. Filing a frivolous lawsuit was a classic intimidation tactic. They were banking on the fact that I would be so terrified of the legal fees, the time consumption, and the public embarrassment of a drawn-out court battle that I would simply write them a settlement check to make it all go away. I took a cab straight to Naomi's office. She sat behind her large glass desk, scanning the pages with a look of absolute disgust. "We are not settling," Naomi declared, tossing the paperwork onto the table. "We are going to file a motion to dismiss, paired with a highly aggressive countersuit. We will demand an immediate injunction to stop their ongoing online defamation, and we will submit every single piece of evidence proving they actively conspired to extort you. But to build an ironclad defense, Taylor, I need you to prove this is not an isolated incident. I need you to establish their pattern of behavior. That directive forced me into the most painful weekend of my life. I had to sit on my living room floor surrounded by 10 years of printed bank statements, highlighting every single time I had financially rescued my family. I was not doing this to collect old debts. The statute of limitations on most of it had long passed anyway. I was doing it to build a psychological profile for the judge. I highlighted the $4,000 I paid for my mother's dental surgery 6 years ago. I flagged the $1,200 I spent replacing the transmission in my father's truck. I marked the countless times I had covered Brooke's supposedly forgotten portion of group family dinners. The emergency grocery runs, the last-minute utility bills. Seeing it all laid out in neon yellow ink was devastating. It was a tangible, undeniable map of how I had systematically purchased my own exploitation. My family did not love me. They budgeted for me. Despite the cold anger hardening inside my chest, a heavy knot of guilt remained entirely focused on my niece and nephews. My oldest nephew was turning 6 years old the following week. Brooke had strictly embargoed all communication, essentially holding the children hostage as emotional leverage. I refused to let the kids think their aunt had simply abandoned them. I went to a local bookstore and carefully selected 3 separate, age-appropriate adventure novels. Inside the front cover of each, I wrote a handwritten letter. I kept the message simple, telling them I loved them very much. I was proud of them, and I would always be their aunt. I packed the books into a box and shipped it via certified mail directly to the home of Connor's mother. Knowing she would quietly pass them along to the kids without Brooke interfering, I needed to ensure the children knew they were loved, while simultaneously keeping my absolute boundary with their parents intact. The turning point of the entire legal battle arrived on a Tuesday evening. My brother, Rowan, called me. His voice was shaking. "Taylor, check your email right now," Rowan said. He explained that he had gone over to our parents' house to help my father fix a router issue, while trying to sync the family cloud storage. He stumbled across an audio file that Connor had accidentally backed up from his phone to the shared family drive. It was a voice memo, likely recorded by Connor to remember his talking points before they had ambushed me with the vacation schedule. I opened the attachment on my laptop and pressed play. The audio was slightly muffled, capturing a conversation between Connor and Brooke in their kitchen. Connor's voice came through with chilling clarity. "Do not push her too hard on the flight upgrades yet," Connor said on the recording. "Just get her down to Florida. Once we get her trapped with the kids in that villa, she will be completely exhausted. You know how she gets when she is tired. She avoids conflict. She will sign anything to keep the peace, especially if your mom is sitting right there crying about family unity. We just need her signature on that $35,000 bridge loan, and then she can go sleep on the floor for all I care." I listened to it 3 times. The sheer predatory nature of the recording made my skin crawl. It was the ultimate smoking gun. It proved premeditation, extortion, and extreme bad faith. The very next night, my phone rang. It was my father, Warren. He had not spoken to me since the night the concierge threatened to call the police on him. His voice was low, stripped of its usual booming authority. "Taylor," he began, clearing his throat, "this whole situation has gotten completely out of hand. Your mother cannot stop crying. The lawyers are expensive. Just drop the countersuit. Let us sit down and figure out a compromise. We are family. You have to bend a little bit here." He was asking me to surrender. He knew about the massive debt. He knew about the extortion plot. He knew his daughter had been targeted by her own sister, but standing up to Brooke and Linda required a level of moral courage my father simply did not possess. He was terrified of losing face. He was terrified of the conflict within his own household. He would rather watch me be completely drained dry than admit his entire family structure was toxic. "I am not bending, Dad," I told him quietly, "and I am not compromising with people who plotted to steal from me." Naomi called the next morning with the final update. The court had mandated a formal mediation session before allowing the civil suit to proceed to a judge. Naomi explained the strategy perfectly. Mediation was supposed to be a negotiation, But for us, it was an execution. If Brooke and Connor failed to settle and drop their suit during mediation, the case would go to open court. That meant Connor's failing business, the massive lawsuit against his agency, and the secret home equity line of credit my parents took out would all become matter of public record. It would destroy their carefully curated social image overnight. The morning of the mediation, the sky over the city was heavy and gray. I put on a perfectly tailored dark navy suit. I pulled my hair back into a tight, severe knot. I picked up a massive, 3-inch thick black binder containing every printed email, every bank statement, the hotel floor pallet request, and a transcribed copy of the voice memo. As I walked through the heavy glass doors of the legal building, my heart pounded against my ribs in a steady, heavy rhythm. I was not afraid of their lawyer. I was not afraid of their lies. The only thing I was truly terrified of as I walked toward the conference room was myself. I was terrified that when I saw my mother cry, when I saw my father look defeated, the deeply ingrained, lifelong habit of being the good, compliant daughter would kick in, and I would soften. I gripped the thick binder tighter, letting the sharp edge of the plastic dig into my palm to keep myself awake, and opened the door to the final battle. The mediation room was suffocatingly sterile. The walls were painted a flat, neutral gray, and the long mahogany table felt like a battlefield dividing two completely different realities. Sitting across from me, Brooke launched immediately into her rehearsed performance. She dabbed at her dry eyes with a crumpled tissue, spinning a narrative of pure victimization to the court-appointed mediator. She claimed I had unconditionally promised a magical family retreat, only to maliciously snatch it away at the 11th hour simply because I resented her happiness, leaving 3 innocent children traumatized and stranded. Connor leaned forward, attempting to look like the reasonable, exhausted patriarch. He slid a thin stack of printed papers across the polished wood. They were text messages. He pointed to a highlighted bubble where I had written that I was looking forward to spending time with the kids. He deliberately cropped out the rest of the conversation where I explicitly refused to be the full-time nanny. My lawyer, Naomi, barely even glanced at the papers. She steepled her fingers and looked directly at Connor's attorney. Unless you are prepared to submit the full, unredacted data files complete with timestamps and metadata proving the context of those messages, I suggest you pull those back across the table. We brought the actual timeline. I opened my thick black binder. The snap of the metal rings echoed loudly in the quiet room. I did not yell. I did not cry. I simply laid out the unassailable truth. Piece by piece, I slid the printed ultimatum across the table. Babysit kids or don't come. I followed it with the email from the resort concierge, highlighting Brooke's specific instructions to demote me to a support room and prepare floor pallets for me to sleep on. Next came the color-coded spreadsheet demanding 40 hours of unpaid labor. Finally, I laid down the printed photograph of Connor's digital notepad, the one titled, "Keep Taylor Calm." The mediator, an older woman with sharp eyes, meticulously reviewed each document. The temperature in the room seemed to plummet. "There is one final exhibit," Naomi stated, her voice slicing through the heavy silence. She tapped a few keys on her laptop. This was recorded by Mr. Halstead and stored on a shared family server. Connor's voice filled the room, echoing off the bare walls. The recording laid out their entire scheme with sickening clarity. The plan to exhaust me with the children, the strategy to trap me at the anniversary dinner, the explicit intention to extract a $35,000 bridge loan to save his failing agency under the guise of family duty. Connor went completely pale. Brooke stopped dabbing her eyes. The tissue dropped from her hand onto the table. The mediator folded her hands and looked directly at my sister and brother-in-law. "This ceases to be a dispute over a withdrawn family gift," the mediator said, her tone devoid of any sympathy. "What is documented here is a coordinated effort to fundamentally alter the material conditions of a trip funded entirely by the respondent, effectively turning a vacation into forced labor. Furthermore, the audio establishes a premeditated intent to subject the respondent to financial duress. My father, Warren, had been sitting silently at the end of the table, his posture shrinking with every piece of evidence. The mediator turned her sharp gaze to him. "Sir, you are referenced in this plan to push family duty to secure the loan. Were you aware of this financial scheme?" For the first time in his life, my father could not bellow his way out of a corner. He looked at me, his eyes wide and panicked, before finally crumbling under the weight of the absolute truth. "Yes," he whispered, his voice cracking. He admitted, right there in front of the mediator and the lawyers, that he and my mother had secretly drained their equity to cover Connor's debts. We were desperate. I thought Taylor could just handle the rest. I thought Taylor could always save the day. That confession was the final nail in the coffin. Brooke's facade shattered completely. The self-righteous anger morphed instantly into raw, unadulterated panic. She looked at her attorney, her chest heaving. She finally understood the trap she had walked into if they refused to settle and force this into a public courtroom. Every single devastating detail would become public record. The massive business debt, the predatory plotting, the fake brand sponsorship scheme, and the online defamation would be exposed for the entire world to see. The capitulation was absolute. Within 20 minutes, the papers were drawn up and signed. Brooke and Connor formally withdrew their civil lawsuit with prejudice. They signed a legally binding agreement to immediately delete every defamatory social media post and issue a retraction. They also signed a strict no-contact order, barring them from harassing me ever again. I did not pay them a single dime. I did not cover their lawyer fees. I walked out of that room with my finances and my reputation completely intact. A few days later, the 80% refund from the luxury resort finally cleared and settled into my checking account. I sat at my kitchen island, looking at the large number on the screen. It felt like dirty money. I did not want to spend it on myself. But I also refused to let my family's toxic cycle poison my relationship with the only truly innocent people involved. I opened a new browser tab and contacted a wealth management firm. I used the entire refunded amount to establish an independent, ironclad educational trust fund for my 3 nieces and nephews. I designated a third-party fiduciary to manage the account. Brooke and Connor would have absolutely zero access to it. The funds could only be dispersed directly to educational institutions once the children turned 18 years old. I had finally found a way to support the kids without feeding the monstrous machinery of their parents' entitlement. That night, I stood by my floor-to-ceiling window, looking out over the city. This was not the triumphant, explosive victory you see in the movies. There were no grand apologies from my parents. There was no tearful reconciliation. My version of revenge was entirely realistic, which meant it came with a quiet, lingering sadness. I now maintained only very limited, cautious contact with my brother Rowan. I had initiated a deep, indefinite period of separation from my parents. I had permanently blocked Brooke and Connor from every aspect of my existence. I had not won by causing them pain. I won because, for the very first time in my life, I had established an unbreakable boundary. I finally understood that loving my family did not require me to set myself on fire to keep them warm. I did not have to be their emergency fund, their crisis manager, or their unpaid servant. I poured myself a glass of cold water, turned off the kitchen light, and walked toward my bedroom. The apartment was completely silent, and for the first time, it did not feel lonely. It just felt safe. I was finally done living on the floor. Thank you so much for listening to my story today, and I would love to know where you are tuning in from. So please leave a comment below to share your location and your thoughts with the community. If you enjoyed this, please subscribe to the Lily Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and support me further by hit the like button so this story can reach and be heard by even more people.